Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I rise in support of this bill, the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing and Other Legislation Amendment Bill. Money laundering is a serious business in Australia. It's an illegal business. Some people talk about it being a victimless crime, but of course nothing could be further from the truth, because where money laundering is committed, taxes aren't paid on that money, and often, in fact, more often than not, the concept of money laundering arises because, as the name suggests, they are trying to clean ill-gotten gains. So the ill-gotten gains are derived from criminal offences, often from organised crime, which, as I'll talk about shortly, arise anything from illegal gambling to paedophilia and child molestation groups, and the evil that they peddle on the internet. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, money laundering is a very, very significant problem worldwide. The United Nations estimates that the amount of money that is laundered around the world is somewhere between 2 and 5% of the world's GDP. That is, somewhere between 800 billion and $2 trillion a year. Between 800 billion and $2 trillion per year. Mr Deputy Speaker, one of our preeminent regulators in this space is AUSTRAC. Now, it's AUSTRAC's responsibility to identify criminals involved in money laundering, involved in offences such as tax fraud, drug trafficking, tobacco smuggling, people smuggling and scams such as the now infamous Nigerian loan scams. Money laundering takes many different guises, or it comes under many different guises. Money laundering is achieved certainly not just in Australia but around the world, but it's often achieved through casinos, through pubs and clubs and banks. We know that as a result of the Banking Royal Commission, Justice Kenneth Hayne made 76 recommendations to clean up the banking, superannuation and financial industries. We know, Deputy Speaker, that the Commonwealth Bank of Australia was fined $700 million for 53,700 breaches of anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism finance laws. 53,700 breaches, resulting in $700 million in fines. Not to be outdone, Westpac was recently fined for 23 million breaches of the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism finance laws, involving $11 billion in transactions, including transactions linked to child exploitation, resulting in a $1.3 billion fine. Tabcorp, at a much smaller end of the spectrum, was recently fined $45 million. Not exactly a small fine, but it's not $1.3 billion, but $45 million for failing to report suspicious behaviour to regulators over more than 5 years. Mr Deputy Speaker, around about 2017, in my electorate on the Sunshine Coast, the Sunshine Coast Council made a public announcement that they intended or were considering to build a casino on the Sunshine Coast. And that was not going to happen on my watch. And I vociferously fought against it, as did many people on the Sunshine Coast. The Sunshine Coast is a family-friendly environment. It's where many people in this place, and in fact from all over Australia, go to holiday because of its family-friendly environment. Why, when we let you back in, when we let those Victorians back in, why would we as a community give up our biggest natural advantage to differentiate ourselves from places like Brisbane and the Gold Coast? But Council was hell-bent on building a casino, and I and a number of community leaders fought against it. And during that time, I'm very proud to say that that is now dead, DEA dead, as a dodo. And I will hold Premier Palaszczuk to her commitment to me that she will never allow a licence for a casino on the Sunshine Coast, to her credit. But I was asked on a number of occasions during that public campaign, what's wrong with a casino? A casino, people would say, would be great for the Sunshine Coast. Well, apart from hollowing out the local economy, my biggest concern was the attraction it would have to organised crime and money laundering on the Sunshine Coast, something that is not what you would call prevalent on the Sunshine Coast today. Now, if anybody needed any further evidence of why we should never have a casino on the Sunshine Coast, I want to speak a little bit about the inquiry that's currently going on in New South Wales in relation to Crown Casino. Now, I want to preface this by saying that the inquiry is ongoing. There have been no final determinations, although the council assisting has certainly made recommendations. But the council assisting has certainly recommended that Crown Casino is not a fit and proper person to hold a licence for the Barangaroo Casino in Sydney. Why is that relevant? Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, the council assisting Adam Bell told the inquiry that Crown was not suitable to hold the licence. He said that ultimately it was harmful to the public interest for Crown. In summary, he said, "We submit that the evidence presented to this inquiry demonstrates that the licensee is not a suitable person to continue to give effect to the licence, and that Crown Resorts is not a suitable person to be a close associate of the licensee," he told the inquiry. During the course of the hearings, the inquiry heard allegations Crown encouraged staff to continue to work in China, despite warnings from Beijing that it was cracking down on foreign casino agents. We've seen stories on 60 Minutes and in the newspapers about wholesale, these are allegations, wholesale money laundering being undertaken in casinos, in their casinos in Melbourne. People turning up to casinos with large duffel bags of cash, walking in, getting chips, having a bet, then cashing those chips back in, walking out. Money's cleaned, back out, it's legitimised, and that money is often the source or the result of ill-gotten gains. We have to do better. We have to do more. When you think about the evils that are being perpetrated by these organised crime gangs on our children, on our communities, and that's why, Mr Deputy Speaker, I am so very pleased to see this bill come before the House. Now, this problem is not just confined to casinos. One former Clubs New South Wales anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism finance compliance auditor claims that between $65 and $75 billion are laundered through clubs and pubs just in New South Wales each year. Between $65 and $75 billion just in New South Wales through pubs and clubs. Now, these are legitimate clubs. These are RSLs, they're sports clubs, they're bowls clubs, but they are using, as in the crime gangs, are using legitimate clubs and pubs to wash this money, and we need to do more than what we have been doing in the past, and that is why this bill is so very important today. This bill contains a range of measures to strengthen Australia's capability to address money laundering and terrorism financing risks and generate regulatory efficiencies, including amendments to expand the circumstances in which reporting entities may rely on customer identification and verification procedures undertaken by a third party, to explicitly prohibit reporting entities from providing a designated service if customer identification procedures cannot be performed, to strengthen protections on correspondent banking by prohibiting financial institutions from entering into a correspondent banking relationship with another financial institution that permits its accounts to be used by a shell bank, and requiring banks to conduct due diligence assessments before entering and during all correspondent banking relationships. Also, to expand exceptions to the prohibition on tipping off to permit reporting entities to share suspicious matter reports and related information with external auditors and foreign members of corporate and designated business groups. It also will provide a simplified and flexible framework for the use and disclosure of financial intelligence to better support combating money laundering, terrorism financing and other serious crimes. It will create a single reporting requirement for the cross-border movement of monetary instruments, and it will also address barriers to the successful prosecution of money laundering offences by clarifying that the existence of one Commonwealth constitutional connector is sufficient to establish an instrument of crime offence, and by deeming money or property provided by undercover law enforcement as part of a controlled operation to be the proceeds of crime for the purposes of prosecution. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Finance Act requires reporting entities to identify and verify their customers through customer due diligence procedures, which represents a major component of the compliance costs. The bill will provide reporting entities with further options to rely on customer due diligence procedures undertaken by a third party. These options could reduce the time involved in identifying each customer by 66% and the cost of verifying each customer by 80%. Mr Deputy Speaker, just this reform alone is expected to deliver significantly reduced compliance costs and an estimated regulatory saving of some $3.1 billion over 10 years. So this is good news. It's aside from reducing the risks of the evils that come from it, it's going to reduce compliance costs, and I commend the bill to the House.